Hi folks, this is Kevin, Map Practical. This is Applications of GIS, Lab 2, Part 2, Proportional Symbols. And we're looking at the relationship between aid to African countries and GDP. So in Part 1 of this, we've already gone through and joined the GDP tables to Africa and then exported them out with just these few attributes. So we got rid of the huge amount of attributes that were in there. And what we're really interested in, obviously the country, and then the percent change in GDP or the trend in GDP. Now the percent change is for the entire period from 1960 to 2018. And the trend is the change per year. And these are both per capita. So in this particular case, Ethiopia had a 363.85% change, but that equals 2.68% change per year for the entire 59-year period. A lot of people find this trend statistic to be a more satisfying way of looking at it. So anyways, let's just turn that off for 1 second and go back to the original Africa continent shapefile or feature data set, and we're going to get rid of all joins here. So remove all joins. And that's just because it had the GDP data joined to it. And then I'm going to right click again and go down to joins and relates and add a join. And we're going to have to dig around and find the proper aid data. Now this is going to be the aid per capita joined to CSV. That's the one we're looking at. Now you can usually join to XLSX, but you need a plugin. So it's just easier for me to go with CSV. You can get the plugin if you want. And then it's still going to be the name long as it was in the last. So there's the name long, and country is the one we want to go to. You could hit validate join. It's going to probably tell you some of the attributes aren't indexed. I just go for it, see if it works. And then the way to tell is to open up the attribute table and slide on over to the right and see if all that data is in there. Yep, we still have some actual nulls. Remember, those are kind of the failed states that won't have any data. Those are true no data states, and we can take care of those in a moment. But percent change in aid and trend in aid, it's all in there. Great. So now we're going to export this out, make it permanent. Right click, go down to data, export, not table, but we're going to export the feature. And we're going to make sure that it's going inside of our African aid geodatabase. Inside, oh, and I have a misspelling there, Ariafaka. Sorry about that, folks. I was moving too fast. But inside that feature data set, and output name is going to be something like Africa aid and then underscore join. So this will be the, oops, probably important to spell aid correctly. All right, and then fields. So we don't need all this extra data in here. We're just concerned with these calculated trend and total percent change. So the feature class is the first one at the top. We'll go all the way down until we see the beginning of our data. So we want to keep country. So shape area, hold down the shift, get rid of all those. Great. And then we don't need the individual years unless you wanted to map those. Now if you wanted to keep these, you could, and then you could just hide them to make it easier to work with your attribute table. But I know for this particular lab, we can get rid of it. So now we got our country, percent change in aid, and the trend in aid. And we'll say OK. I'll let that go. And it should add it. And there it is on top. Super. So now we can remove, well, let's first double check, make sure what we got. There we go. So it's always going to give you the shape length, shape area. Interesting to know, shape length and shape area are map units, so you should never use those for measuring anything. Those are auto-generated in GIS, and if you want to know the area of something, then create a new field and calculate it using the Calculate Geometry tool. And make sure you're in projected coordinate space too. Which reminds me, we should see, let's make sure that our working map here is in our Albers equal area conic. Great. All right. So now we can go back to our original Africa data and unjoin everything. Remove all of our joins. And we can turn that one off. And I want to move my aid below. Oops. Yep. And we're going to do a choropleth map of the aid as the base for all of our maps. And then we're going to compare it to different attributes, so like GDP or maybe child mortality or malaria or whatever. What we're trying to do is kind of test this theory. Does aid equal money? So the World Bank, the IMF, they all believe if we pump aid into these countries, their GDP should go up. But that doesn't always work. but a lot of this aid has gone to really improving human lives, and maybe that should be the rubric that we're measuring, right? So let's take a look at this African aid join. We're going to go to its appearance and then symbology. And right now it's just the African countries outlined. If we go down to graduated colors, there it is. That's going to make our choropleth map. And color scheme I like for this one, you can choose if you wanted purple or you wanted, I'm going to go with a blue, right? And right now it's just doing its normal thing where it's going to be natural breaks, janks, which is almost always the default, and then 5 classes. 5 classes is okay for this, that's fine. But as you can see, when we go ahead and change these to format the labels and tell it that it's actually a percentage, and we can get rid of some of these decimal places. And now when we look over here in the table of contents, you can see we've got from, negative 89% all the way up to, oh geez, it's huge. Is it 2 million? Yeah, over 2 million% change. Those kind of numbers just bother people, and you can also throw some 1,000 separators in there that make it easier to read, right? Those numbers are just harder for people to wrap their heads around. That's why I kind of like this trend in aid. And we'll go ahead and format that. It's still a percent, and we can still reduce the number of decimals. And it already represented a percentage. So there we go. So now we've got, from negative 3.9 up to almost 20% change from 1960 to 2018 per capita for each individual person in these countries. That seems to be a little bit easier for folks to wrap their heads around. So, but since we have above and below zero, so people that had negative aid, meaning basically their government was paying off their loans and people were not receiving aid, they were actually paying into the system. So we want to have a clean break at zero. And looking at these, it might work out. Let's just play around with some of the other classification systems. We could go with the geometric interval. Didn't change the map too much. Sometimes it's good to take a look at the histogram. That's a pretty even distribution, pretty normal distribution. What about if we just went with equal interval and then take a look at our classes? Now that kind of works. Okay, so now I got 5, 10, close to 15. What about if I do this? So I make my lowest break is going to be at 0. I make my next at 5. So now they are manual, but I've used the equal interval to give us, the steps. So I can kind of get that this is pretty close to what it would be. So I'm not changing these by much. And then my top one is 20 and below, or 20 to 15, right? And we'll hit enter. And then you look over here and we got a pretty clean looking legend, right? So there's really only one country kind of went below, that'd be Algeria. So obviously they weren't getting very much aid. They had a reduction in aid over this 59-year period. Other thing we can do is we have some actual real no data countries. So if we go to more and we tell it to show values out of range, it'll put this out of range there. We don't want it to be called out of range in the legend. Let's call that no data, because that's pretty typical. And instead of just a gray area, let's go in here and give it something. And I'll scroll down under all these styles, and there was a style that had some kind of diagonal hatchering. All right, let's see if I can find it again. I got vertical hatches. Yeah, let's do that. So we'll do vertical hatches on one, and there they are. And then if I go to their properties to make them show up better, kind of like this this orange color. It's either gold or orange. Let's go with this Seville orange and apply that and see how it looks. Oh, that was to the outside. We also have to do this one as that same orange color. Okay, now if we hit that, there we go. So now it's easy to see the no data, right? So that's looking pretty good. That's our choropleth map. Nice clean class breaks. Very easy to see what's going on there, right? Trend and aid. So what we should see is everywhere where we have high, darker colors, we should also see the GDP going up. Well, let's take a look. Not so much. Let's go ahead and play with the symbology on this one. You can go with the old plain circles. I find them, not as appealing. So let's do this. First, let's change this instead of percent change of GDP, because we could go over here to classes and then take a look at the statistics. And see, this went from -15 all the way up to 2,663 and some change. Let's change the variable to our trend in GDP, which I like better. And then instead of proportional symbols, I like to go with graduated symbols. And the reason for that is that every symbol on the map then represents a class that's over in the legend. Okay, so now we can make some changes. First things first, I really don't like this template, so I'm going to change that. And I'm going to look at the gallery again. And you can go with all the normal ones, but it's kind of nice to have a little bit of variety. What about if we went all the way to the bottom? I think it's there. There we go. There's some 3D ones. So what about if I just do a 3D centered sphere? All right, so they're all in red for now, but that's okay. We can change that. We'll go back. And then let's see, size-wise, that might be too small. What if I do a 5? Is that any better? I'm going to try maybe like an 8 point, and then take this guy up to maybe 30. Let's see what we get. Click out of there. All right, that doesn't look too bad. And maybe this is better at a couple smaller ones. Yeah, maybe 6. We'll try that. We're going to stay with no background color because we want the choropleth to show through. But let's work on our class breaks. So we're definitely going to have a 0 break here. And when we look at the histogram, it's pretty skewed. We could try the geometric interval and see how that breaks it up. All right, well, let's try the same thing we have for our choropleth and go with this equal interval. Ooh, nope, that's no good. What about quantile? Yeah, that could work. That could work. Oh, we're still in percent change in GDP. How did that happen? This should be trend is what I want. I don't know why it popped back. There we go. So now I'm seeing something that looks a little bit more reasonable. So yeah, looks like, let's go ahead and change this out and try this. Let's go with 0. So if I'm going from 1 up to 6, what if I go in 1.5 steps? So this one's going to be 0, so it captures my negatives. I'm going to make this one 1.5. Hope you can see the reasoning why I might try it like this. 3. Oops. 4.5. It's jumping around on me a little bit. Oops, it didn't hold my 4.5. Let's get that 4.5. And then 6 on this one. Rounding it up to the nearest number. Okay, so 0, 1.5, 3, 4.5, and so forth. Our labels, we can mess with the labels. Those are going to be percentages, right? And it already represents a percentage, and we'll just take this down to 1. You don't need more than 1 decimal place with the percent. Okay, now it's a little bit more readable. From -1.6 to 0, 0.1 to 1.5, 1.6 to 3, so on and so forth. All right, now for color. Well, red is definitely at the bottom of the scale, right, for this GDP, so it's in the negative return. You can see some of these countries that have the dark color in the choropleth, meaning they've had a significant increase in aid, actually have lower GDP. That's not so good. But we can also individually change the colors for these symbols. So if I click on this guy and then go to its properties, and I'm just going to start with a darker green on that one. How about like this green? Leaf green. How about this one? Peacock green. And hit apply. We can always go back and change these. Great. So I'll go back and then I'll change this one. And what I'm doing here is when I look inside, I know that this one on a diagonal, the next lower green would be this leaf green. So it just gives them a nice separation so you can really see them. We'll do this one. Same thing. So yeah, now we're going to go to the macaw green. All right, and then we'll go and just capture that one last little red circle there. And that one's going to be kind of almost a yellow, which is good, solar yellow, because that's the lowest class before it hits 0. All right, so there we go. We could play around with changing the sizes, but I don't know if we want to, because right now there's a country that's being covered here that we can't even see. So if I turn that off, and that's one of those lower ones. So you might have to put a leader line out with the name of the country and perhaps its trend in aid underneath there. Or you could call it out with a text box on your map. Either way. So it's always a good idea to save. So this is my working map. every one of the maps, so if you go and you collect the mortality data from Gapminder, or the change in fertility, or infant death mortality, right? Then you're always going to have the African aid as the underlying one, and then you're always going to put your proportional or classified symbols, right, over the top of the aid choropleth. So your graduated symbols are always over the top. So we're always going to be comparing to aid in Africa. Oh, I forgot one thing. Over on my African aid, I also want to show the no data there. So show out of value ranges or out of range, and then this is again no data. And since I have enter, and then what is my other color there? Oh, okay, there we go. So they're vertical, so these ones are going to be horizontal. Go to the gallery, scroll down. Those ones are vertical, these ones are going to be horizontal. Cool. And then I can change those to the other color. Change both of them. Hit apply. There we go. So now you can tell where we have no data for both GDP and for aid, and where we have it just no data for GDP, right? In Somalia there. Okay, so at this point you're ready to do a layout. I've been working in my working map, and I keep working in my working map, and I put all my data in there, I do all my joins. But my first map we're just going to call Africa GDP because it's going to be comparing GDP to aid. The second one might be malaria, right? So, but I'm going to create, so insert a new map, and there it is. And I'm going to go ahead and, oops, over here, double click and go into the general tab, and I can change this one. So this one's going to be my GDP map. All right. And coordinate system I could mess with, but it should auto change when I go back to my working map, and I copy my Africa aid join and say copy, and then go to my GDP map and say paste. Why can't I paste it in there? What's going on? Why would that not allow me to paste it? Let me just make sure I got a good clean copy. Yeah, and then over here. There we go. I just didn't get a good paste. So there we go. So it brought over all the symbology exactly like I had it. And it also changed the coordinate system. Let's just double check that. Albers equal area. Great, conic. So we don't need to mess with that guy. I don't need my topographic map under there. I don't generally like their base maps, but that's up to you. If you like them, that's cool, whatever. And now I got to go grab from my working map also my, well, that's strange. What happened to my choropleth? That makes it 0 sense. Where did it go? Did I mess it up? Did I accidentally delete it? Nope, there it is. Huh. Somehow I deleted it. So that was a nice recovery. I just was using the undo. Strange. All right, so grab this guy. You might see it in the playback that I hit remove instead of copy. Gotta be careful. Don't be so fast. Okay, go back to my GDP map and see if we can paste that in there. And then it goes below. Now it showed even though it was above. That's because the graduated symbols had no background on them, right? And you can see that over here that there's no background color still, so it still shows. Now I can do a layout. So I'm going to go to Insert, New Layout. I'm going to go with a letter 8.5 by 11, standard page size. There we go. And then I'm going to add some guides to it on the 1/2 inch marks. 8 here. And that's going to end up being 10.5. I can hear the pigeons outside. They're all flustered because it's snowing. I don't think pigeons were made for snow. All right. And then we're going to go ahead and add a map frame to it. So when I click on the Add Map Frames, we should see my working map and the GDP map. Now, if you just do default extent, it'll all fit inside of your guides that you just made. If you go with the one that was in the working map, then it's going to be slightly different. So I'm going to go with this default extent here, and then you have to drag it and throw it in there. And then we're going to have to activate this guy to bring it up. Now, I don't know why it came in so small. It usually doesn't do that, but you know, it's just strange. It does things. So this map frame, what we need to do is we need to activate. There we go. So under the layout tab, and we're going to hit activate. And now I have the ability to change the scale of things, right? Get it where I want it, move things on the page. Because before, if you just move around, you move in the layout view. So there we go. That's about, we had to leave ourselves some nice space down here for our legends, and then for a title and so forth up top. There we go. Okay, and then you go back to project, I think. Nope, not project. Is it map? Or is it layout? It is layout, and then close activation. There we go. And now we're back in the world of our layout. Okay, cool. So next thing's next, we got to add some legends here. So let's go ahead and choose, say, our Africa aid join. And then I'm going to go to insert and over here to legend. And then you have to draw it in. And you draw it nice and big at first so that you don't have anything missing. We can always change it, right? We can always change the size of it. So I want to right click on it and go to its properties, and it'll open up this format legend over here. And first things first, I want to definitely go into the legend items properties and get rid of the layer name and the heading. So the layer name is the layer name from within the table of contents, and the headings from the attribute table. So we get rid of both of those, and then we go to text symbol and appearance, and I like to change my fonts always. So I'm going to go for a Times New Roman if I can find it. That's just my go-to font sometimes, but you know, you'll have to play and see what you like. Great. And now we'll go out to the original legend, and then not underneath this general options, but under this one right here. So the name of it is map frame. If we hit that, you'll see it shows legend, and this is what we need to change right here. So this is change in aid per year. Right? And there we go. And now we can kind of resize this thing and put it where we want it. All right. It's still dynamic. It would change if we change things over here, but that's not looking too bad, right? It didn't keep the change in aid per year as Times New Roman. I found this, look, so it's showing Tomaha, but it's saying it's Times New Roman. So you just have to go back to one. It'll change it, and now choose the times again, and it should apply it to the, there we go, to the title. Great. All right. It's always tricky, right? Super. So we're done with that one. Let's add one now for the GDP. So insert, legend, draw a nice big one. There we go. Go to the properties, get rid of the layer name and the headings name. This time I'm going to wait to change the font until the end. And we're going to show this guy. And we're going to call this one change in GDP. Oops, GDP per year. Oh, GDO. How about GDP? They're so close to each other. Okay, there we go, and probably helps if I spell year correctly. Thank God for spell check. There is spell check on maps too. It's a good thing to use. Okay, now text symbol. Let's see if we can change everything to times right off the bat. Yes, okay, great. So you'll notice these things snap to the guides. Sometimes that's not the best. If you use the arrow keys, it moves the whole page, but if you modify them with the control, it'll move them in little increments, and in the shift, it'll move it in big increments, and that's how I align things. And then you can even select both of these guys and align them straight up and down on each other. It's trickier, I think, in Pro than it used to be. As you get used to these things, you'll be able to see how it gives me an alignment bar right there. It's just easier to do it sometimes by eye. But if you're a perfectionist, then you can also work with it. All right, so we're pretty close. What do we want to do? I don't like just the old white layout, so let's add something here. This is the data frame, right? So I'm going to right-click and go to its properties. And then let's see, what kind of options do I have for this map frame? Okay, so the border, instead of it being black, I'm going to go with a kind of a darker brown. Cool. And I'm going to round it. I'm going to go up by, say, 5%. Let's take it up. Let's go big. Big and round, 10%. There we go. All right, and then the background, I'm going to make that just kind of like a really light beige. Oh, that looks kind of nice. But you have to round it the same amount, otherwise it'll go behind your little rounds for the border. So this has to go up to 10. There we go. And a drop shadow. No, I'm not going to get that crazy. All right, how does that look? Not too bad, not too shabby. All right, now that we need to add a text. We can do dynamic text for our title, but man, I just have less control. So let me go ahead and just do it with a text box. So just draw that up here. And go to the text. Text symbol should be in times, but it's maybe not. Let's go ahead and type it first and see what we get. If we go to the properties, we'll be able to usually type it. Yeah, here we go. So what is this map? This is going to be GDP versus aid, and it's per capita, and it's in Africa. And now it's getting to be a little bit long, so let's put it down here, and this is going to be 1960 to 2018. Yeah, and let's see how that looks. Okay, it's too tiny, but that's all right. We can change that text symbol. This thing's going to need to be much bigger, about 28. Apply that. Okay, looking good. And then let's get rid of the old Omaha. Let's go some times. Super. And then position, let's see. Yep, we're going to go centered. And we'll hit apply and see what we get. All right, GDP versus aid per capita in Africa, 1960 to 2018. Not too bad. All right, and then we center that guy up. Super. So now we really only need a few more things. We need maybe some projection information. Do we need a scale bar? I don't know. Do we need a north arrow? No, it's not the point of the map, right? But we definitely need to tell people where we got the data and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead. If you were to do insert dynamic text and go down here to, where's it at? I'm looking for the coordinate system. I might have passed it. Oh, spatial reference. There we go. So if we put that in, then you have to draw it. The problem is it draws, or it gives you a huge amount of data. All right? Look at all this stuff it's giving us. You could go through and remove them dynamically by right-clicking and saying cut, but I just find it so easy. If we haven't changed the central meridian, we've done nothing except for use the very defaults that are in this projection. Why do we need all this? We don't. So let's go ahead and right-click on this guy and convert to graphics. Now it's just text, and now we can make this something that's a little bit more reasonable, right? So, boom. No need to tell us that it's Africa Albers equal area conic twice. So what about if we just do spatial reference and then WGS 84 would be enough for almost everybody. There we go. With that information, you could recreate this projection, no problem, right? Okay. And since we have some text going down here, let's go ahead and do data. And that's going to be gapminder.org, ORG, and then also cartographer. And it's going to be Kevin Mick. All right, and then maybe a date if you want, when you made the map. That's always a good thing. And I don't even know what day it is. It is 2/21/21. Okay, 2/21/21. Oop, nope, 21. There we go. And ta-da! Now we have something that's a lot more reasonable, easier to deal with. All right. Oops. Come on, work with me. Don't need that to be selected. There we go. If you go too far with making it small, you'll see the 3 little red dots. That means there's overrun text in the text box, and you're going to have to expand your text box to see everything that should be in there. Once you can see everything, that should go away. Okay? And of course, we're going to get rid of this text symbol and make it into, see, it thinks it's Times New Roman, but it's not. Just change it to Franklin and apply it, and then we'll go back to Times New Roman real quick. Apply that. There we go. All right. And now I can hold down my shift and move this little text box around if I want to. Down. And I might even change its position to be right justified and apply it. There we go. Now it's going to fit in that corner a lot easier, a lot nicer. Oops. See, it just moved the whole entire page instead of just the thing I was working on. Okay, so now we've got a pretty decent layout, right? That's about what we're looking for on these maps. And then for the next one, you'll just go back to your working map. You'll create a new one called, I don't know, malaria map, and then you'll copy and paste the Africa aid join as your choropleth, and then you'll put your trend in malaria over the last 59 years on top of it as graduated symbols. Okay, hope that was helpful. If it was, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you find these helpful, and we'll see you next time. Take care.